Joan of Arc, whose full name was Jeanne d'Arc, was a famous French war leader born in 1412 and made a saint by the Roman Catholic Church in 1920. She is best known for getting the French army together and helping to win the 100 Years' War. She did this to free France from English rule. Many people still pray to her as a patron saint of France, even though she only lived for a short 20 years. Jeanne la Pucelle. Joanne wrote Joan the Maiden, which is what she signed her letters as. In France, people still call her La Pucelle, which emphasizes that she is free, never married, and a virgin. It was not known for sure when she was born, but it was most likely in 1412. Jacques d'Arc and Isabelle Romé, her parents, both died before she did. She owned 50 acres of land and farmed it. He also worked as a tax collector and was in charge of the neighborhood watch. Joan grew up in the country in France with her sister, 3 brothers, and mother. All of her daily tasks, like spinning wool and taking care of the family pets, fell on her. The English came through the area where Joan lived when she was 13 years old. People in the area thought that peace would not come until the English occupiers were pushed out. After this raid, Joan had her first vision. St. Michael, surrounded by angels, showed up to her in the yard. Once that happened, she started having dreams often. She often saw St. Margaret of Antioch and St. Catherine of Alexandria, 2 female saints who were well known in her area. Both women were abused and killed because of what they believed. The 100 Years' War. A lot of France was ruled by England, Burgundy, and the Holy Roman Empire during Joan of Arc's lifetime. The 100 Years' War began in 1337, and she was born during it. Almost all of the fighting between England and France took place in Joan's home country. She grew up in a country that had been destroyed by war for decades. During Joan's childhood, France was split into different groups. The country was already torn apart by war, and King Charles IV was too sick to rule. His closest cousins fought over the regency, which made things even worse. King Henry V of England attacked France in 1415, taking advantage of the fighting going on inside France. This was the start of the Lancastrian War, which was the 3rd and last part of the 100 Years' War. A lot of French land was taken over by English troops. In 1420, the Treaty of Troyes put an end to the fighting. It was made possible by the marriage of a French girl to the English king. A lot of France didn't agree to the deal, so the war kept going. The French troops lost heart. And then came Joan, a virgin carrying a banner. During the time that Joan was growing up, a dual prophecy was going throughout France. An example of this is the revelation made by Marie Robine of Avignon, who passed away prior to the birth of Joan of Arc. There was a vision that Robine had of a woman who was armed and would come to save the kingdom. There was yet another prophecy that said that a virgin bearing a banner would put an end to the misery of the nation. There were occasions when Joan herself made reference to these prophecies, stating that it was predicted that a virgin would bring France back to its former splendor. It was during a time when women had such little authority over their own lives, let alone the fate of nations, that the French monarch and the kingdom as a whole were willing to accept Joan. These long-standing prophecies are a major reason for this willingness. King Charles VII. Joan asked a military leader to take her to the king's court for the first time when she was 16, but he said no. After only 2 months, her town was attacked. Soldiers from Burgundy burned down the town and its crops, and Joan and her family ran away. Joan asked to see the king again, but she was turned down both times. At this point, she was starting to get the attention of the powerful. A duke called her because he thought this girl might have supernatural skills that could help him get better. Joan said she didn't have those skills. She shamed him instead for living with a woman who wasn't his wife. In 1429, when Joan was 17 years old, she was finally given a group of guards to take her to see the king. For the trip, she cut her hair short and put on clothes for guys. When Joan met Charles, she told him he was the real king and told him he needed to protect Orléans, which is one of Europe's best defended towns. The English came to the city the year before and built several forts around the walls. The king and his council sent a group of scholars to question Joan of Arc. She told them she was a good Catholic, which made the king and his council happy. Then she was put through an exam that was meant to prove she was still a virgin. Because these signs were so good, Charles was sure that Joan was the Virgin of the Promise and ordered her plate armor. Her flag was made just for her, and she took a sword from the altar of St. Catherine. After many decades of war, the men lost hope. The prophesied arrival of Joan made them feel better and gave them strength to keep fighting. Joan read aloud a letter to the leader of the occupying troops before she left for Orléans. She told him that God sent her to get him to leave France. Orléans. In order to protect the city of Orléans, thousands of English soldiers surrounded it. In spite of the presence of these enemy encampments, Jeanne de Dunois, the leader of the French soldiers, was successful in bringing Joan into the city. The teenage girl, who was dressed in armor and were flying her own banner, was received with joy by others around her. Joan was first regarded as a figurehead, but she swiftly earned the respect of both soldiers and commanders by putting herself in the front lines of violent engagements. Within a short period of time, she began providing strategic advice to the leaders of the military. Soldiers from France rallied around Joan, and with her assistance, they were able to take control of several of the English fortifications that were located all around the city. Only 9 days after Joan arrived in Orléans, the English army quickly withdrew their men. This was interpreted as evidence that Joan was, in fact, sent by God, and a number of important theologians authored treatises stating explicitly that this was the case. On the other side, the English believed that Joan's bravery and swift triumph were unmistakable indications that she was a tool of the devil. This notion would eventually result in her assassination at the hands of Englishmen. Crowning King Charles VII. In the immediate aftermath of the victory at Orléans, Joan made it her goal to travel to Reims in order to facilitate the official coronation proceedings for Charles. Joan continued to put herself in the most dangerous areas of the fighting, and the French military was successful in retaking bridges and cities that had been seized by English soldiers. In spite of the fact that she sustained multiple wounds, including a blow to the head, an arrow to the shoulder, and a crossbow bolt to the leg, she never lost her sense of bravery. An opposing army that had been decimated by these assaults retreated in the direction of Paris. The mere prospect of an assault was sufficient to convince Reims to yield, and Charles was crowned with Joan by his side afterwards. An assault on Paris. Joan pressed the king to proceed with the retaking of Paris, but his councillors were of varying perspectives on the matter because of Joan's efforts. They did ultimately get closer, but it was a gradual approach. Along the way, a great number of cities capitulated without putting up a fight. Joan was severely injured, and 1,500 Frenchmen were slain when the army eventually launched an assault on the highly defended city of Paris. Both of these events occurred simultaneously. Charles issued an order to put an end to the assault, despite Joan's encouragement for him to continue fighting. The king did not accept her and issued an order to retreat. The court became disillusioned with the girl soldier as a result of this episode. Joan was more impulsive, driven by religious conviction and a certainty of purpose, in contrast to the majority of those who advocated for a diplomatic settlement and a ceasefire with Burgundy. The conviction of Joan of Arc. Joan did not let the fact that the king she had helped to crown did not support her stop her from her goal. She and her men kept attacking towns with strong defenses, and at first they were successful, but finally they had to turn back. After this loss, the king and his court didn't like Joan as much. The town of Compiègne was under attack, so Joan got a group of volunteers together to protect it. She was joined by other leaders. Joan was a very harsh leader, and she killed court mercenaries who could have been freed by paying a ransom. Joan was caught during an attack on a camp of Burgundians near Compiègne. There were 2 times she tried to get away, and she even jumped from a tower window into a dry ditch. Charles didn't do anything to help Joan get back from the English. It was found that Joan was guilty of heresy. One of the main charges against her was blasphemy for wearing men's clothes. She refused to say sorry or put on a dress. She said she would not wear women's clothes again until she had done what she was supposed to do. English officials paid for the trial and used church law to hide their political goals. Joan was a threat to England's claim to French lands, so she was going to be killed from the start. While she was being questioned, Joan stayed cool and logical. Even when she was faced with torture, she never changed her mind. She was given the death penalty because she wouldn't say she wasn't seeing things. At the age of 19, Joan of Arc was burned to death. Isabelle Romée, Joan's mother, worked hard to clear her daughter's name after she died. She did this and lived a long time. She asked Pope Nicholas V to remove Joan of Arc's death sentence for heresy. In the end, she was successful. In July 1456, Joan of Arc's sentence was thrown out. She was made a saint by the Roman Catholic Church many years later, in 1920.